sun, the trees, the sort of the nature part nature makes you feel
not from a pantheistic sort of thing, but just sort of it's
comfortable.
Yeah, I didn't create most of this. It is creation. It's I don't know, it's soothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that. I have a very little outdoor space because we're in the city, and this will come up sort of in some of our conversations. But right now, my neighbor, who I can reach out and touch their house, they're they're pile driving their back because they have a water leak. So I can't be outside, and it's really hard. Was that Jim? Who knows?
Yeah, Jim uttered.
Jim's there.
We're eating, so we're not eating in front of you.
You can eat in front of us. It's okay.
No, it's not pretty. Well, the word family came up first for me too, Libby, but I'm also thinking that I feel at home when people demonstrate a true interest in me. And so, of course, absolutely, family is the most important on that, but I can feel it at home otherwise too. And I just that.
Nice. The caring.
Yeah.
The being seen, and
That's it.
That's nice. Is Janet there? I don't know. The mystery.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hi.
Are you also eating lunch?
Yes. I'll eat in front of you if you want.
You can eat in front of us. I still have like coffee from hours ago that I'm, drinking. And
so, feeling at home?
Yeah.
I think it's just a state of being for me. That you create your own. I create my own home. I definitely know when I'm on vacation.
What does that mean?
That when the garage door closes, when we're leaving, that's when vacation starts, and that's a different space. Whereas home is where the things you care about, the pictures, the environment that you create, that's comforting for me.
So a different level of familiarity.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking
like stuff, all your stuff. Your stuff that you see all the time, that makes me feel at home.
Although, and when I say, like, I love road trips. And I always, when we go on a road trip as a family, whoever is in the family at the time, now it's down to two of us, but that to me is truly the important thing, is who's in the car. And and that's really all that's important, ultimately.
Yeah. So there's a lot of echoes of, about it's more of the spiritual, the psycho-emotional connection, than, and the stuff is kind of part of that. I mean, especially some people in this group have moved more than others. Some have been in their houses for a really long time. But when you think about, what do you take with you? What are I've always said that I'm not a nester. Like I just, and part of it is I move all the time, and I actually like to move physical locations. And then what do you, what is that stuff? What's the most important things that you bring? But I was thinking about, I think about home, like when I take my shoes off, like I'm not wearing shoes right now, that sort of level of comfort and familiarity. And so the question, right, is how do we turn our homes into these sacred spaces into these mikdash ma'ats, into these small sanctuaries, of which we have been, when the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem, that's exactly what we were supposed to do. Is we no longer had a central place where we would go and offer sacrifice and commune with God. And our homes actually became that place. Interestingly, actually, just as a side, I just thought of this, to add that, when we talk about homelessness and hunger, houselessness and hunger, especially today and in our city, and being part of that. And in rabbinic writings, there is an assumption that everybody has a house. That was just sort of a given. That was actually a communal responsibility, even more than food. Was everybody had a dwelling. Everyone had a place to be and to gather. So I think that is related to this idea of that we each are creating these mini sanctuaries. We see it most common on Shabbat. So how many people light Shabbat candles, or you've ever lit Shabbat candles at your house? So you've had a temple in your home. Hello, Leslie. You've had a temple in your home, because the whole idea of lighting candles or having challah or kiddush is what the priests would do in the temple, and that we now do in our homes. So we sort of have a long history of this idea of creating these sacred spaces. So I'm going to share.
That made me think about mezuzahs, which divide the sacred from the not quite yet sacred spaces in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And when we come in and out, how do we acknowledge that we're entering this sacred space? We mark our rooms as sacred. So one of the, immediately when I think about sacred space, one of the first things that comes to mind is Abraham Joshua Heschel, and from his book, The Sabbath. And I'm sure many of you have read this, or you've heard of it, or at least you've heard of Rabbi Heschel. Let's see if I can make it a little big. Can I make this bigger? Huh. Interesting. On Google Docs, let's see. Do I have to do it this way? Is that a little better?
Yep.
If we follow along, maybe that might be too big. Let's see. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. So Heschel, prolific writer, and one of his amazing tomes is called The Sabbath. It is in physical form a very thin book, but I always say it takes a lifetime to read and explore and understand in all these ways. And so I just wanted to bring one little piece as a grounding from this, where he says, the mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth had been established, God would create a holy place, a holy mountain or a holy spring, whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Yet it seems as if to the Bible it is holiness in time, the Sabbath, which comes first. When history began, there was only one holiness in the world, holiness in time. When at Sinai, the word of God was about to be voiced, a call for holiness in man was proclaimed, thou shalt be unto me a holy people. It was only after the people had succumbed to the temptation of worshiping a thing, a golden calf, that the erection of a tabernacle of holiness in space was commanded. The sanctity of time came first, the sanctity of man came second, and the sanctity of space last. Time was hallowed by God, space, the tabernacle, was consecrated by Moses. So again, Heschel is probably one of the lead thinkers on this idea of holiness in time as opposed to space. But I love this, right? Because it's giving it this biblical foundation of, you would think the way that we sort of experience our Judaism in modernity, and you see he was writing, in the 50s, but especially actually in that time, interestingly, in the 60s, when, conservative Judaism moved to the suburbs and we erected big synagogue spaces and all that we're really focusing on space. And here he's saying, look, if we look at our foundational stories, space came last. And the space was destroyed. Right? So not once, but twice, the space was destroyed. And yet we were still able to go on as a people, which is really, this is the amazing part of that. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do this year? And I really actually want to talk about practical things and get your, feedback and interest as well. But I do believe that we can create, and I'll send this document I put together to all of you too. I do believe that we can still create that feeling and that awe and that inspiration, even when we're not in our sanctuary, even when we're not in our sanctuary space. I have been surprised I've said this recently, and people probably think I'm crazy, but I've been surprised how attached people are to the synagogue space. Because I really thought that, in this time we would be sort of beyond the attachment to the building. And I also understand that the attachment to the building is symbolic of attachment to the community. So what are ways that we can, make our spaces in a way that would bring us together as a community? So
it's funny you say that, because watching Friday night services in the Kahana's living room and in your basement, I felt enveloped in, like I'm sitting there in your basement with you, and with however many people happen to have logged on at night, and it felt very community. It felt and the informality of it, I think, which is what some people may not like, was great. I think it's why I always like services better in the chapel than I ever did in the sanctuary. It just that whole hamishness of the whole thing was just, and so the last 2 weeks doing it from the sanctuary was interesting. And I realized you really have to do this because you got to practice for high holidays, because otherwise how are you going to get all the bugs and glitches out of it beforehand, which needs to happen. And it was pretty amazing, and I enjoyed it. It had to have been weird for you to be standing there for this empty sanctuary. And then when your stepdaughter jumped in with Kiddush and Motzi, it was like, okay, now we're back in your basement and everything is like it should be again. So I don't know. I get it. I think there's the two spaces, and maybe the bridge is great. And I'm sure for some people, being in your basement is just not a service. But to me, it's been one. It's been great.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I find, I actually would like to see if we can figure out how to get the technology to work in Poland and see if at least that's a little bit closer and intimate. But yeah, it's very bizarre to be in this huge space and to have sort of an iPad in front of your face in a big empty room. Where I agree. I mean, the Kahana's house is beautiful. I said, when they started doing this, and you've got beautiful, Alice's of blessed memory, her art behind them, and they set up a whole studio, and I'm like, this is great. Why Why you have set up this amazing space. Why do we need to be back in this temple? Because the temple to me symbolizes the community. But it's are we setting what are we able to put ourselves in the same mindset when we're sitting in our living rooms, dining rooms, basements, TV rooms, whatever, bedroom, hopefully not the bathroom, that we would when we're in those sacred spaces?
I keep thinking about the Heschel thing that you read, how it's almost like the space, the temple was, God only gave that to us because we screwed up, right? It's like, if you're doing it right, I'm giving you Shabbat. You have this holiness in time, and you carry it in yourself. So we should ideally be able to tap into that. And yet we screwed up and made the calf. And so it's like, all right, fine. If you're too dumb to do it, you go to this building, okay? And yet that's become this like symbol, right? Like, when the Messiah comes, like the temple will be, and so it's just, I'm really just kind of spinning that around to think like this wasn't the original intention, maybe.
Yeah. Because part of our humanness, right, is how are we attached to stuff and things.
But when we were schlepping through the desert, it was a space, but the space kept moving with us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it had tent walls, but what the tent walls were on top of was always different. We were never stepping in the same river twice as we schlepped along,
Mm-hmm.
which should have taught us even then that it's all portable. We take it with us. It's inside of us. And that's the secret of our survival. There's Israel, there's Jerusalem, but we take all of that with us. Judaism can exist wherever it happens to be, wherever we are.
Yeah, God is not confined.
Yeah, because there was a whole concept of gods of spaces. Like when you went from one country to the other, you had a different God, and that's not and has never been our concept.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. One of the things I have for you is some notes, some intentions to decorate your space. I'm going to jump just for a second because it reminded me of, and so one of those is, as I scroll down, is a very familiar, and that's Matovu Halecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your sacred places, O Israel. And this is one that we know really well because it is part of our daily liturgy. Every single day in our morning liturgy, we say this blessing. And I know most of you know this, but I'll just remind us that this comes out of the book of Numbers, as I say there. And this comes from the story of Balak and Balaam. And you had this king who was afraid of the Israelites, and they became too numerous, and he was getting nervous. It reminds us of Pharaoh back in the day. And so he got this non-Israelite prophet Balaam and said, hey, I need you to go and curse these guys because I'm really scared. And he goes and he's standing right on the top of the mountain, and he's looking down into the valley of all the Israelites encamped there. And out of his mouth comes this blessing, right? So out of his mouth comes, Matovu alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael, instead of the curse. And it's so amazing that this has worked its way into our daily liturgy. And I also think, right, it's telling us, how do how do we take all of these curses and sort of turn them into blessings? How do we turn this around? Similarly to, what do we do when the temple was destroyed? What do we do, when we enter the land and all of that? How do we take, every day we're reminded, how do we take, what we're not ready to face and turn it into something positive? That every morning we're sort of, commanded to do that. And I think, again, especially right now, when everything feels pretty cursed on some level, pretty heavy and pretty liminal, right? We're all in this like crazy extended, opposite of liminal, but like extended liminality, of using something like that, all of these teachings that our tradition is really steeped in, of turning those curses into blessings. And again, that's what I hope for all of this, is that we're able to sort of change our mindset, which is, none of it is easy, but to help us find the blessings and be open. Part of it is also being open to that present moment. Even Balaam, right? Like just having to be in that moment, in that present, and as much as, he wanted to go down the path of curse, it was the path of blessings. How can we open our heart space to be willing to just experience what we're going to experience, which is going to be unlike anything else that we have in our lifetime in this context of the high holidays. So part of that, in real practical terms, is thinking about this stuff now. Is really, so I have 10 little tips. And I want you to add to them and think about it. But it's to not, for all of this stuff, is to not wait. And I know many, all of you on this call have been on services, have been a part of Shabbat on a consistent basis and in different programs and all that. But then to think about the high holidays, as in a normal year, we think about the high holidays different than we think about Shabbat. So the first one is really thinking about where our prayer space, to choose your prayer space carefully, and to really think about what are the distractions, and differently than maybe the distractions we're willing to put up with sort of on Shabbat. But, is our appliances gonna make noises that I'm not even thinking about? Is Alexa, I know in my house, all of a sudden, like Alexa will like come on for nothing. And I'm like, I don't even know, like, what do I need to unplug? Is another Amazon package going to be dropped off? Do I need to put a do not disturb sign on my door so that I know that no one is going to come and do that? I'd love to hear where people have their prayer spaces. I can, for me, I can say in our house, where we don't have a lot of, we don't have a lot of space for the amount of people. And so you see that a lot of time I lead services in the basement, and that's because it is normally it's the only place that I can be without hopefully being disturbed. And it's not a place where I would want to actually experience the service. So it's a place where I lead the service because I like the blank wall. I like that I can put Shabbat stuff on the windowsill. Sometimes the boys will, from the outside, jump and scare the crap out of me from the window. But when you turn the camera around, it's like the litter boxes and, crap everywhere. And we don't have there's no storage in this house. So like the tents and the mattresses and the sleeping bags and the extra toilet paper, right? Like there is nothing that I want to then like experience a service in that space. So I was thinking about where do you want to be? Where do you feel a connection that's different from other spaces in your house? Have people found spaces that they find, you know, where you watch Friday night services or Saturday morning, like that feels like that's your space, free of distractions. That's where you want to be.
One thing I found with Friday night, because I stream it, is I wanted to sit where I could stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. Whereas like Torah study, I sit at the dining room table where I don't have to get up and down. And it's very difficult to stand up and sit down from the dining room table. It's a better space in some respects, but if I'm going to actually stand when I want to stand, that's a big factor in particularly for a longer service where you just really want to be able to do all that, be able to move appropriately.
I find none of the spaces work for me. They did in the beginning, but the longer this goes, the more alone, the more I realize that I'm part of the community, but I'm still alone in my space. And the few times where I've had the opportunity, like last Friday night, where I shared it with, I did it with Michael and Jim Richmond, and it was as close to what it was like for us 6 months ago, yet it was a completely different world. And I don't like to skip the services. The services are very meaningful to me, but the space just doesn't feel right. It just feels like there's something tremendously missing.
How did you guys share the service together?
We sat in their backyard, socially distanced.
Oh, nice.
And we watched it on a laptop, and then brought in dinner. But it was the first time we were able to be together on Shabbat since Robert died. So it had a lot of different implications.
Of course.
And it was just hard.
Yeah.
Yet I can't imagine skipping services. That just wouldn't feel right either.
Well, I mean, I think you bring up a really important situation that you are in, and I love that you guys did that. And I actually was something I had been talking about sort of at work that we didn't feel like we could really organize, but the idea of having like watch parties almost, I think that is really important to acknowledge that, already feeling alone because we can't be, gathered in our sacred spaces, but then feeling alone with Robert missing and all of these different aspects of the last 6 months of, how could you then not be alone in that space? I mean, how, could you for Rosh Hashanah and, this kind of stuff of figuring out to be in the yard or something and distance from each other.
Right. Well, I mean, I'll do Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with Tova and Freda and Pat. I don't know which house we're going to do it in or what it's going to look like, but at least we'll be together.
Yeah.
So it's not space, it's people.
Yeah.
And I think that's
people.
And I think that's what Tammy and I have talked about. It like we so miss greeting people as they come in the door. All the people, all the regulars from Friday night services, I miss them so incredibly. And it's not, we could be meeting anywhere. It doesn't really matter where we'd be meeting. And maybe because I belong to a small synagogue that always had to go do its high holiday service someplace in rented space, really wouldn't matter. It's the people, and just to see them come in and no, I managed to email with Nathan today, and I'm feeling so much better about some stuff because I didn't know if he was okay, and he's still down in LA. It's the people. It's just hard.
Yeah. No, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard for everybody.
What feels really painful is that, stuff like this, like Zoom, I mean, it's better than nothing, right? I mean, it's better than not having the connection, but it's feeling this sort of feeling joy and pain at the same time. Like the joy that you are able to connect, and yet being at the same time aware of how inadequate it is or how much better it could be. And so it's hard to have an undiluted, joyful experience, because even the joy has drops of sadness in it.
Yep. Which is very Jewish. So I think part of it is like not pretending that it's going to be all joyous, right? Like we know that that's not the reality of life, right? This is taking the drops of wine out of the glass for the plagues and all that, right? That the joy and the sadness are always intermingled. I mean, every simcha we mention the people who are no longer with us, right? We always have that understanding of that's part of our humanness. And so I think it's, how can we set ourselves up the best way possible? And again, just continue to acknowledge, like, there's a lot of grief. There's going to be, when we filmed Havdalah at the end of Yom Kippur, I started crying. Like I had to leave the pulpit. It caught me totally off guard. But that feeling, right, of standing in an empty synagogue with a robe on and a N95 mask on, and, the end of Yom Kippur in August, and it was like overwhelming. Just overwhelmed with that we're all holding in these months and months of grief on so many different levels. And so, and then saying, okay, and we have to keep, putting one foot in front of the other. And this is how we move on, and we set it up the best way possible. We figure out what can I do for myself that at least I can say I've done as much as I can to go into this experience in whatever space that I'm in. And so if it can be the people, and then it's the people, and that's really important. And if it can be some of these other, I know it can seem sort of like silly suggestions, but really thinking about how do we sanctify this space? So like the Kavanot, and I'm sure that many of you already have different Kavanot in your house, different intentions or Jewish. I mean, I always sit behind my, not by might, not by power, but by spirit. That those are, where can you find that piece to sort of feel connected? If you have a blessing for your home, if there's, and the ability to move things around, like, okay, I have this, piece of art over here. It's really important to me. I'm going to move it here for the purposes of, setting up my sanctuary for this time. Does that feel right? Getting into changing your place. I mean, this, my sort of, a lot of this, like 3, where are you going to sit? Are you going to sit on the same chair that you sit on day in and day out? And even if you're going to sit on the same chair that you sit on day in, day out, I mean, a lot of this is like sort of thinking about Passover, of like what things we do like that. Do you put a pillow on that chair? Do you decorate it? Do you bring something that makes it different and special? Because actually when we do that, it also on some level, tricks our mind. I mean, that's why people rearrange their furniture, the same furniture in the same space, and we move it around, and then we're like, oh, we have so much more room. Look at this. This looks so much nicer. You know, so we put a piece of fabric over a chair. It's like at weddings, you know, when they like cover the chairs or something, which on one level I always thought was so silly. And then on the other, like it makes you feel like, oh, this is different. It's a different chair. It's a different space. Or where you put your computer. You know, are you going to decorate the table, or are you going to decorate the TV stand or whatever to make it feel festive? To make it feel like this is not just any other day, or this is not just any other week. Like this is the most important time in our year. And how do we want to honor that and make that feel different? And how do we want to make that feel special? Whoops. And then, I mean, we sort of talked about some of this, but continuing in that specialness and connection. And some of this, I think the tangible does lead to the feeling like you're sort of surrounded by the people or the history, the connection. What are those meaningful objects that you have? And how can you surround yourself with some of these meaningful objects, even if you're not using them in that moment, but they still bring to mind, you know, the bar bat mitzvah, the grandmother's talit, you know, all these different pieces, the candlesticks that you feel like you're surrounded, pictures. Moving things around. You have pictures all over your house, but what is it that you want to bring into that space? Again, you're not setting it up for your everyday living room use or, you know, long term. It's just saying right now, this is going to be my high holiday sanctuary. And just like in our sanctuary now, where we have, you know, the menorahs and the flags and the cases. I mean, right, we've got like these museum cases full of heirlooms. We do that to bring the history and the connection. You know, so what are those pieces that speak to you? And if you and what are those things you've always wanted maybe to buy or to add to your Judaica collection? Again, I'm sure everybody here has everything they need and it was passed down and all of that. But, you know, if this is the time, if you were thinking of, you know, you've always wanted that new set of candlesticks or a different Kiddush cup, or this might be the year to just sort of honor that difference that you are in your home so much more, that you do get another piece of Judaica that you use specifically at this time.
I just wanted to mention that you put the whole thing about the shofar, and we have one, and it's usually up on the shelf, and Pete can start to blow it. I sound like a sick cow, but I put it on the dining room table at the beginning of Elul, because at the beginning of Elul you're supposed to blow it. And I have stood out my front door and blown it a few times badly. And if we have another post office demonstration, I live next door to the post office, I will take the shofar there and blow it. But it sits on the table every night when we eat in the dining room, and it's like reminds me that this is Elul and that this is a different time. So I'm liking that. I think that's been a good move for me. That's
great. I love that. And we're doing on second day of Rosh Hashanah, the sort of community, Oregon, Southwest Washington is going to do a shofar blast across America kind of thing. And there's going to be, at 4:00, blow your shofar all over the place, which I think will be, really fun in that way. Has anybody else put objects out or ways of reminding them of the time? Somebody unmute. I can't see it. No, nobody's put anything out. It's because you already have all of your stuff out and ready to go. you already.
Well, oh, we lost it.
Jim?
So Michael used to be in charge of the gift shop.
Oh, that's
And
true.
so we do have a lot of Judaic.
So we should come to your house for
I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm going to request we don't get any more right now.
no more Judaica. So, but you'll put your extra Judaica on the porch, and people can come by and get it for their high holiday display. In that way, I appreciate that. So, and support the Sisterhood gift shop if you're in the market for more Judaica. They are still selling things, although I will say I go in the office one day a week for my own mental health, and there's the pop-up. There was a little Sisterhood gift shop pop-up right in the front of the office for a while now. It's really nice, and it's still Passover because time has stood still, and I sort of chuckle every week, like I know it, but I walk by it every week and I see the frogs, and I just think like, it's still March, like we're talking about the high holidays, but it is still March in the rest of the world is what it feels like. One of the things that we have been really suggesting too is to not watch services, on your laptop or your phone, but really hooking it up to the TV. Do people do that for Friday night already? Are you watching on your TV?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a hard one. I know even at my house, it's sometimes a struggle, and I've been tell you, like, all of this advice is advice for myself as well. I am not prepared. And that and even in my family, I've been talking about, okay, like we have to get it on the TV, like this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to act. Because it's a very different experience to be sort of on your laptop, like I'm on my laptop right now, as opposed to, being on a screen. Plus the difference between, as I said, there is like work, it's the holiness and the profane. And so, how do we elevate the Kedusha, and make that separation? I think the biggest is how do we, not only silence Alexa and all the other stuff, but how do we turn off our phones? And how do we really that the emails and the texts and all of that can wait, and the notifications, sometimes I forget, like you could sort of ignore some things. But then all of a sudden, the New York Times notification keeps popping up, or, whatever the latest thing is. And so turning all of that off. And I know even when we're in the sanctuary, we don't turn it off. I get it. And actually the irony is now the way we're doing services, people are like, we encourage everyone to text Shabbat Shalom and all of that, but I'm getting like text stuff all during services. Like it is the most distracting thing in the world because there's nobody in the space with us. So it's really hard. And like what I would give to just turn the phone, like just put your phone away, turn everything off, and just, try and be, which is not how we are in our houses. But like just making it all go away. Clothing and how we act. When we get dressed up, we feel different. And so I would encourage that, especially for the high holidays, to, put on different clothes than you wear during the week. Shoes are up to you. I'm really enjoying the no shoe part. So I'm not going to tell anyone that they have to wear shoes. Rabbi Kahana will tell you that you have to wear shoes. He gets upset that I don't wear shoes, but I love the not wearing shoes. I feel more rooted. But the wearing different clothes, like feeling like that if you wear a kippah, if you wear a talit, to do that and to engage in the physical motions of prayer. Which I'm impressed, Judith, that you're to engage in those motions. I find this the most difficult. as someone who, when I watch services, I find it's absolutely the most challenging. I'm like, I'm not standing up. How am I gonna stand up? I'm gonna turn, like, that's silly. I'm sitting in my living room, like, and it's very different. Like, when all of a sudden you say, like, it's Shema, and we are all going to be quiet, and we are going to stand up, and we're going to, like, to have that intention and that attention instead of running around and not paying attention. And I really do think that while it's all interconnected, I think it is wonderful that, the silver linings of this horrible experience of not being together, but like on Shabbat, and I know lots of people are eating dinner during services. I know nobody on this call, but like lots of people are eating dinner on services and doing their thing. And I think that's fabulous. I think that's great. And I hope that part of the high holidays is really setting that apart, in that we're not, eating during services and doing all of that, but like really engaged. I have, my collection of pandemic pictures and things that I'm going to keep. And I have an amazing picture where we were watching a bat mitzvah. It was actually a Neva Shalom bat mitzvah, but we're watching a Neva Shalom bat mitzvah, and we were like having that moment of yelling at the kids to like stop and let's at least like have Shema. And all of a sudden, like, so there's like the computer, and right behind is Max in full like Nerf regalia, like vest and goggles and huge things, and just stop for like a minute. I'm like, this is, especially if you have kids at home, like this is what it's like to have, services on Shabbat when you're in your house and not, actually in the synagogue. And we've already started talking, to the kids, like, that's not what's going to happen on the high holidays. Like, you're going to actually put on dress clothes, and you're actually going to sit, and you're actually going to pay attention. And like, this is how it's going to work. And it's hard because it's very different, but finding East in your house, again, I'm sure this is all like preaching to the choir. Does everybody have a prayer book?
So are they going to do the online Machzor for the high holidays? Rabbi Kahana said they would. Okay, because it's not out there yet. Good. Okay.
It is out there.
Oh, good.
It's out there, and I can send you this, so you can click on it from our website. There is a free digital flip book, which is, it's such a gift that the CCR did this. You can purchase the Kindle. And you can purchase the books if you want to. I have here, you could do all that, and you can contact the office, and there's a form here to fill out, and we're happy to loan you the prayer books.
I tried to purchase the regular prayer book for Kindle, and I purchased it and then I returned it because it was like it would not load on my Kindle. And it wouldn't load on my iPad. I'm like, okay, I don't want it on my computer. That's not what I want. I want to hold it in my hand like a prayer book, because I thought this would be great to have it on my Kindle. So I have to give it another shot. But at the time, it was like, no, you can't put this on your Kindle. Because for $4.99, it was like a bargain,
Yeah, I would give it another shot. Rima, we should ask the CCAR, because they have a person on staff. Who's a rabbi, and this is all he does is the technology side of this, and like making this all available, and he might have some tips, or he would want to know that it's not.
Yeah, I'll give it a try again. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a discount code.
Oh no, you purchased it?
I thought about I really wanted the books, and I thought about borrowing the books, but then I thought that maybe that would seem more like if I had my own books in my space, that would, so I ordered them. They weren't that expensive, but I missed the deal.
Yep, I'm sorry.
Do you know when they're going to loan them out if you've asked for one?
Soon. I think there's going to be like maybe next week even. We actually just talked about it and said, like yesterday, I was in a conversation saying, release the books. So, you should be they should be contacting you any moment to release the books. But yeah, I think having the books will make a big difference. Having something in your hand, either right, the physical book, or being able to hold the iPad. And I love, Libby, that you bought the books. I mean, I'm sure many of you had Gates of Repentance, although in our synagogue we made them available. I grew up in a synagogue where you brought your own. That was the minhag, is you owned your own copies of the High Holiday prayer books and you brought them. But what I really liked about that, I mean, I like that we have the books available. I think that's more inclusive. And what I liked about having my own was just that familiar, like this was my book, or this was our family book, or, here's what was written on the inside, and, the sort of different things in that way was really nice. So if you buy the book, I think that's also really beautiful.
Well, I like thinking that, if I feel like I need it during the year, I can go look at it during the year. I mean, if you when they're just in synagogue, I guess I could try to find them, but who's going to?
And from looking at these books just a little bit, like Mishkan Tefillah, where there's so much, like Mishkan HaNefesh is even more. I mean, there's so much poetry, there's so much explanations and text studies. I mean, it's like you could be reading and studying these books, forever. We skip so many pages even in a normal year because there's just so much. So I think it's great to have it. And I think, hopefully, have they come in the mail yet?
No, they're on the way.
Okay. And hopefully the other books will come to the rest of you soon. And I mean, definitely before the high holidays, but it'll be nice it's like, that could be a really nice part of the Elul practice of just looking through the books and seeing, finding some meaningful passages, and just, again, getting yourself into that mindset. I mean, I think also one of the benefits of this year is, just having more time to prepare, having more time to mentally prepare, because we're almost forced to, right? If we do this well, then we are, we're forced. I'm sorry, all my things are going off and I can't turn them off. We're forced to think about it ahead of time. So, it actually, unlike sort of walking into the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, and just sort of expecting that it all happen, that we've had to think about our space and our place and our people and the pieces of this that hopefully will make us more prepared in that way. And then I wanted to share one last tip, but a piece of, so we talked about sort of the intentions, and I've got Kavanot, down here, of some suggestions that you could, decorate or just have thinking about. And then there's also, there is this thing called Shviti that you see in a lot of synagogues, and you see it in art and in the stained glass window and all these kind of things. And I loved this. Stop calling me. I loved this beautiful, beautiful, and I think you can just click on the PDF. But this Shviti of Asuli Mikdash B'Shochanti B'Tocham, which I also have on the list, right? Again, from the Torah, that that you're making me a sanctuary. So beyond that God is going to dwell within me, so that it's not about the physical space, right? It's about the spiritual space. And when I create that spiritual space, that's how I become the sanctuary in which God will dwell. And that's actually all the work of Elul, right? And Elul, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's how are we doing the work to make ourselves holy and to have that space. And we're just going to take that over to the high holidays. And I've done that work in Elul. I'm making myself this holy space, and God is going to be dwelling wherever I happen to be dwelling this year, because this year is such a different year. And then I just have some different suggestions of some different, texts that you could use or think about as you want to create your space. Are there other things that people have been thinking about of how they're going to make their spaces sacred, or what it's going to look like?
I have a dilemma that I would like to set it up for the TV, but the TV is in the family room. And I suspect that I am likely to be the only one who is going to be participating. And it seems harder to make the family room sacred as opposed to this corner of my bedroom. So I'm just kind of wrestling with, how maybe some of it will be here, and the part I'm going to force Ira to attend will be down in the family room. I haven't figured that yet.
Did River go to school?
Tomorrow.
Wow. Are they doing in-person classes?
No.
Okay.
There are no in-person classes, or I think there might be a few, but none of River's are. And we have 20 minutes to get River's stuff out of the car and in the room. But I have some friends who had to drop their kids like at the parking lot. They weren't allowed in the dorm. So we're going to take what we can get.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I know some people have to sign off. Thank you for being here for that.
I have an off-topic, slightly off-topic question. When you were doing Yom Kippur services, did you fast?
No, that's why it's so weird. Well, because it's not like we didn't film it like in order.
Right.
So it's funny. There was something today on my rabbi's list where it's rabbi, she's in like Boston. She posted like, which one's weirder, and it was like, filming Yom Kippur and then Rosh Hashanah, filming, Yom Kippur, filming Kol Nidre in the morning, and then like going to eat a big lunch. I mean, right? It's like ridiculous. I'm actually, I'm going to record. I decided to, I'm still recording sermons, but I'm recording my sermons on Zoom because I like the intimacy of Zoom better than I'm having a really hard time in the empty temple. And I really didn't want to do the sermon like that.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad. I think you're right. It's when we're seeing your face like right there.
Yeah.
It's like you're sitting across the table talking to me. It's, yeah.
I feel like you're sitting in your bedroom. We were like, I just sort of felt like it's like a weird. I think I'd get more pushback if I was doing like the evening sermons. I'm doing the daytime, so I think it's more okay to do Zoom from my basement. But I feel like it is definitely bizarro land that we are in. It's just when the technology works, it works, and when it doesn't, it doesn't. And we've had B'nai Mitzvah now, so where like all of a sudden everything freezes and stops, and then you're like, I've been really impressed with the kids and how they've dealt with that. Or Friday nights when we've had some stuff. I mean, actually the irony is the technology is better in our homes because we have a little bit more control over like the speed of our Wi-Fi or the Ethernet can, like I know where to be in my house to get better Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. It's definitely been a lot more complicated to be in our space. And it's interesting. I mean, so like I'm definitely still wrestling with what this means for the future and what does space and time and people, what does community look like
Yeah.
without the space, which, as Libby knows, we are wrestling with that as a board and all of that.
I'm looking forward to seeing the thing that you did for the family service where you're in the river.
Yep.
So I'm glad that's recorded and we can watch that afterwards, since I won't be at the family service.
Yep, you can watch it. We the one that we're not using, though, I want them to send it as a teaser. It's
Oh, please.
we're not using the actual in the kayaks. But I told you, like, I've never seen Ben Sandler nervous. Like, Ben is like the most like chill, like cool. That's actually like part of why I actually really wanted to work at Beth Israel, is like when he interviewed me and I was like, you are like the chillest person I have ever met. Like, during the interview, somebody got sent to the office and he was like, hey, little guy, like, what's going on? Big feelings? And I was like, oh man, this is amazing. He was so nervous. Like, he's got his guitar and he's getting in a kayak and he's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And we're like, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. I don't have a guitar with me. We're gonna be fine. So, don't worry about this. Oh man, he was poor Ben. We put him in the water like so many times. He was like, this is a little much, guys. But
we got to Cantors came up with this way of like, trying to have the choir record individual tracks, and Cantor Green's gonna splice them all together or whatever. Yep. And that started out being horrible. I mean, I'm just, I have a headset on to listen to Cantor and the professional. Yep. And I have to set up my iPhone so I can tape and I'm like almost all the way through Hine Matov. And then all of a sudden my cat walks in and starts, like, God damn it. I have to, So I started over, and then we're doing Neela Kaddish, and that went okay. So I upload those, like it takes an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I went and looked at Neela, because I hadn't watched any of them. And during Neela Kaddish, there's Ira in his pajamas, like walking behind me and going upstairs, like, well, that's what it is.
That's what it is. I think that's all part of it, right? Like we're all like, right? Like we're all in it. We're all.
But it did. And I emailed Cantor. It wasn't as good, but it definitely felt like a connection. It definitely felt good. And so on the whole,
I'm glad you did it.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we're all getting outside of our comfort zone.
I think one of the good things that's happening is that the world is never going to look the way it looked before. So if we're going to have a new normal, and this is really kind of forcing us into whatever that new normal is going to look like.
Yep.
And if we can get through this and feel some good as a result of it, it will make it easier to make that transition, whatever that transition turns into.
Yeah. I think you landed on it, Leslie. We're creating what that new normal will be.
Yeah.
It's not going to just happen to us. We've got at least a piece of making it what it needs to be for us, and we're doing that now, right?
Yeah.
Right this minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just been catapulted, a decade into the future, and so we're trying to catch up in all those ways. But yeah, and then
just the technology. I mean, I can't even imagine how we'd be. I remember when I first had a car phone, not a cell phone, a car phone, and they had just opened up this new highway in New Jersey, and I broke down on the highway in the snow, and I had a car phone and I could call. And how, if I hadn't had that, what would I have done? And the technology has shown up.
You were stuck in New Jersey. Nothing would have worked right anyway.
That's true too. And it was 208. So, no, I'm sorry. It was the top end of 287. But yeah, I mean, but the technology shown up, and without it, we would be figuring something else out. We would be doing something. But we've got this, and that's at least great. I'm so glad when I get to see Leslie's face.
She's out walking. And,
I know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Yeah.
I know I asked this before, and I know it's there, but I, I would love to at some point have access to the Beth Israel archives at Oregon Jewish Museum, because I want to know what it was like in 1918. What we did. What did the congregation do? I mean, we didn't have this. Were people writing letters to each other? I mean, were there high holiday services? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to see more, because right after they opened the building, and then the stock market crashed, right after they opened the current temple, and then they didn't have any money and they closed it. And I always wonder, what sort of happened in those few years before, people came out. Yeah, they had to get rid of the staff, and I think there was like the rabbi, and that was it. And yeah, they closed the building. So it is interesting. This is not the first time, but it still can be, crappy for us, and and then figuring out what we're gonna create on the other side. So,
well, thank you for this, Rabbi.
Thank you.
I'm sure high holiday services are going to be amazing, just amazing.
They're going to be, and they're going to be different, and we're gonna learn. There's going to be other points, so stay tuned, because we're going to do 7 different Tashlich locations. We have signups, so hopefully we can do a little bit of gathering, and if they get really popular, we'll put more in, kind of thing. And there's going to be opportunities to.
There's a brook in Gabriel Park, by the way. You didn't know that. It's walking distance for me.
That's good. I think Fano Creek was the one over there.
Okay, that's there too.
And down at Lake Oswego at what's that place called? Where we did our video. The only public place you can go in Lake Oswego on the river.
George Rogers
Right,
Park?
right off of Main Street. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but stay tuned for different ways and some different Zoom things and stuff as well. So.
And I'm so glad Cantor Green is here. I keep telling her that. I think it's just one more person just going to really help and make this work. Yep. Glad she's here.
Yeah, she's great. We're all very glad. So it's all good.
And you're still a wonderful song leader. I'm telling you this over and over again. I love it when you do services by yourself. You're so easy to sing with. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
You got none of that soprano stuff going. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Ida Ray's like, whoa! like
you. I don't have any of that.
Well, I'm a soprano too, so
I know. That's what I'm saying.
I'm afflicted the same way.
I'm a tenor, so it's hard. It's hard to sing along. Yes. Exactly.
All right.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.